James, I'm Forrest Galante. I'm a wildlife biologist, a fellow member of the Explorers Club.
Cool.
And I've spent my entire life tracking rare and unusual wildlife and incredible ecosystems. So today I'm very excited to chat with you about the incredible ecosystems that you created on Pandora.
Wouldn't you love to be on the first team landing on Pandora and have all this stuff, more than you could ever classify in a lifetime? You know, I mean, you build on the shoulders of generations of
course,
naturalists that came before you,
Yeah.
going all the way back to, you know, I don't know, the Greeks and the Romans, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
The idea of traveling through space to somewhere like Pandora or some other planet,
Yeah.
it's the most exciting friend. You know, it's like Darwinian and when he would have discovered the Galapagos. It's just this whole new world that we never would have any concept of how those creatures got there.
Right.
I would imagine you must have done a lot of research to create the animals in Pandora, because every fiction film that I've ever seen, the animals in that film are a background character or a utilizable tool to the people or the other animals in that film. But in Pandora, there's this interconnectedness, mycelium network and so on.
Sure. I mean, usually animals in science fiction films are apex predators that you have to shoot with your laser rifle.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's about it.
That's it.
Right.
And maybe one or two other supporting creatures, but not an ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we can say we created an entire ecosystem, but we did try to, the animals that were featured, we did try to fit them within a hypothetical ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's your pack predator? What's your herd animal? What's your, solo herbivore? That sort of thing.
Right.
And I mean, the thing that I kept telling the designers, and this is going back mostly to the first Avatar now, is, all right, we're going to see a creature. What's the metaphor? You know, what are we saying it is like here on Earth?
Yeah.
So obviously, we call it the dire horse internally. We never really call it that in the film. Mm-hmm. But the dire horse is obviously a herd animal, domesticatable to some extent.
So if you had schemes like sexual selection figured out within the ecosystem of Pandora, which you obviously had thought of, which I think is fantastic, how much of the proverbial peacocking are we seeing on some of the coloration of those animals? Are you seeing sexual dimorphism, male and female coloration?
Absolutely. Well, we see so few examples of each species that we didn't get into that too deeply until we got to the Tulkun, where we needed to show an entire kind of society, or at least families, family groups. So we had to have dimorphism, and so we came up with more of a hammerhead configuration with what we called the sensor structure of them, and then the females have a more streamlined and more rounded and more close-coupled look. So you can think of the males as displaying, coming to the surface with this very wide display and brightly colored, and the females a little more demure and kind of spy hopping and checking them out. Hey, not bad, buddy.
Very realistic.
Well, it's how it's done, right?
You took a lot of elements, and I know you're a National Geographic deep sea explorer and everything else. You took a lot of elements from aquatic habitats and put them into terrain, right? And so talk to me about that.
That got us through the first movie. We could take small things like Christmas tree worms that spiral in, right?
The Christmas tree worms,
And some of those ideas go way back to the 70s, just my sketchbooks for a project I was thinking about back then, and as a diver, and a lot of them we found together and said, oh, this is a great texture, this is a great structure, usually in small coral reef animals, and then we just play with scale. We just blow it way up, right? Well, we sort of painted ourselves into a corner when we went to go to the ocean.
Right, you're like, we used all that stuff.
We used all that stuff, so what do you do with ocean animals? So we decided that the coral reefs wouldn't be sort of a random agglomeration of different species, but they'd form these kind of fractal patterns. So we actually designed the coral reefs based on basically fractal structures, right? So that there was this sense of kind of organization behind it, almost like AWA was using math to lay out the reef systems.
Oh, interesting.
So as a science fiction writer, you're extrapolating from that which science already understands to things that may not have been discovered yet or might be possible. I mean, going to another planet basically gives you a carte blanche to imagine anything you want.
Sure.
There was an interesting thing, and this isn't about the critters, but I actually had an explanation, a film scene in the first film that explained the floating mountains.
Oh.
And I thought, you know what, I'm over-explaining.
It's too much.
I was trying to shorten the film anyway.
Yeah.
So there are actually, Ewa has 3 unbreakable laws for the Na'vi, which haven't been revealed yet, but if we continue on with this, they will be at one point.
Okay.
Number 1, you shall not use the metals of the ground. Number 2.
So there are, because there's unobtainium and other metals on Pandora.
There are
right?
plenty of metals. There's everything we would recognize.
Right, but they're using stone axes and stone knives.
Crystal edges, like the obsidian blades of Aztecs and so on like that.
Sure.
But they don't use metal, except for the ash people, right? So that's law number 1. Number 2, you will not set stone upon stone.
Explain that.
You're not going to build a city.
Oh, I see.
Not going to build a city. Right?
Okay, so set stone upon stone. You can use stone to make tools.
You will not set stone upon stone.
Understood. Okay.
Because the second you start to build with inert structures, you start to create an organizing principle around the idea of a fixed base operation with grain storage, centralized government, centralized religion, all of the things that came up with the earliest, in the Tigris-Euphrates valleys, the earliest civilizations established it, and then it just propagated.
Which turned into civilization.
Which is what we're in right now.
Exactly.
Right? Which didn't work out so well for nature.
No.
Yeah, and the third law is you shall not use the turning wheel.
Please explain.
Well, the second you start moving loads
Literally
over long distances, first of all, you're having to make roads, which is invasive to the land ecosystems, and secondly, you're starting to trade. And when you're trading at that level, you've got these big repositories in cities of food surpluses and so on. So anyway, she's just putting a cap on how much they can develop. Now within that, there's actually one other law that we applied, but it's not from Ewa. It's just so innate to the Na'vi, it doesn't need to be a law, which is you're not going to cut down trees and saw them up and make lumber. So if you notice, everything that they make is all woven, meaning that it can be fiber stripped from a plant that doesn't kill the plant and may even sort of help the plant, groom the plant, like discarded bandana sleeves and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So let's talk critters for a minute. You mentioned trading a second ago.
Yeah.
The sky traders.
Right.
They're vessels. They're living beings.
Right.
Were those inspired by the wind sailors that you and I have both seen in our home in Santa Barbara?
Wind sailors, Portuguese man of war, that sort of thing. But when I was doing the first treatment for Avatar, I actually had it in as a predator that actually almost kills Jake Sully, where it sweeps its tentacles across the top of these mesas and these kind of barren rock structures and catches small rodents, small like marmots and things like that.
Yeah.
And he gets caught by one of these things, and it's an electric shock kind of effect, as opposed to a neurotoxin. Because I figured if he got slammed by a neurotoxin, he'd be toast.
Yeah, that's right.
At least he'd be all covered with purple welts
like
a box jelly.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, for a movie, this would be better if he's just getting zapped.
Yep. Yep.
So that didn't survive into the movie. And then I thought, all right, I'm not letting this idea go. Let's create a trading culture around these things floating around the planet where they have a navigator, and you actually briefly see the navigator sitting on top of the wind ray, which is another
The wind ray
creature.
is the cuttlefish in the front?
Yeah, the cuttlefish in the front with the kind of, rippling sinusoidal mantle around the side.
It's like a manta cuttlefish stingray.
It's
really great.
manta cuttle blimp.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's either lighter than air or close to neutral.
Okay.
Meaning he might need some forward velocity to become airborne, but he can loiter for weeks in the air without having to come down to feed. So we think through all this stuff, and we want to give the impression that there's so much off camera that you're not getting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're only seeing the tip of the iceberg of culture, of fauna, of flora. That there's a richness that goes far beyond that. Now, we attenuate out about, let's say, 10x out from what you actually see. We don't go, try to create a whole world, but we try to create enough sense of detail.
So then, going back to your earlier drawing and everything else, tell me, if you don't mind, about a couple of the creatures that were cut that you wish hadn't been, because I have to imagine you have dozens of other.
Oh, there were lots of good ones. Yeah, I had this thing called a canopy strider.
Okay.
That was like a daddy long leg spider, except it wasn't a spider. It was a vertebrate,
Okay.
quite large, and it would move through the underside of the trees like this, and then its body was kind of inverted, and it had tentacles, feeding tentacles that would hang down.
And predatory.
Yeah, predatory. Yeah, I was always more interested in the predators.
It's more fun.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Although the hexapede's a fun herd animal, the one with the big sort of distress frill.
Oh,
that
yes,
it
yeah.
puts
You
out.
see them come in at the end of the first movie again
Yeah.
to help. So let me ask you a question about the Turuk then, the big red and blue one. Is that the same species as the others?
No.
So
no,
it's a
completely. Yeah. It's
okay, that because I was
It's
curious.
a
if you,
different ground plan, different chassis. So the Turuk is winged, but it's probably convergent evolution, right? Because it also has hind limbs
Yeah.
and it lands conventionally.
Yeah.
Whereas the Akron, which the humans call banshees.
the banshees, right?
Yeah, right. So the Akron were probably evolved from flying fish originally. I thought of them as having an aquatic origin.
The matriarch.
Yes.
How is she adorned with her piercings and her?
Well, if you notice in Way of Water, all of the adult Tulkun, male and female, have elaborate tattooing.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So this is because they're very tightly culturally interconnected with the Na'vi. So presumably they have some kind of common singing, common dancing. We see a little bit of the common dancing where Tsireya is doing what we call the Tulkun dance.
Yeah,
And there was a big elaborate dance scene where Tulkun and Na'vi were interacting in a kind of very elaborate ceremony. We took it out once again for time. I'd love to see that again because that was really cool. But yeah, so clearly the Na'vi are doing that because they
That's what
don't
I
have,
figured, yeah.
you know, they don't have any
Appendages.
yeah.
Or they have appendages, not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they don't have an
ability.
opposable thumb.
That's right,
so to
yeah.
speak. And plus, they
Okay.
could never do such fine work. But yeah, so when you're being tattooed, you're completely passive. You're just sitting there, just getting the ink. And there are artists, artisans that do that.
Yeah.
Well, if they were celebrating each other's cultures, then why wouldn't they want? I mean, if this goes back 20,000 years, that they have this kind of symbiotic conjoined culture.
Yeah.
Then why not?
Right,
You
right.
know, and why wouldn't the matriarch have adornments, of
Absolutely.
her rank?
Yeah.
I always figured that the big piercings she'd carry even when they were in migration, but that the ceremonial banners that
Yeah.
are hanging down from the piercings, the Na'vi would apply those when they were going into some ceremonial thing, and they'd be stored, and they'd probably be carried by the Na'vi.
Makes sense. And
Yeah.
coming into council, they'd adorn them with them.
Yeah,
And things like that.
yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, here's my tougher question for you.
Okay.
As a biologist,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the animals probably more than the story or anything else, but I'm enjoying it the most.
Well,
And in Fire and Ash, I see an otter-like creature at the very beginning when Loak is riding the outcast Payakan. There's an otter-like creature and it sings a happy song.
well, he makes a little chirp.
That's right.
Yeah.
In the film, that's a moment of happiness and joy and fun because they're
Right.
riding together.
Yeah.
The only other time that I noticed that otter-like creature was when Spider first connected.
Yep, and he rides past a couple of them.
That's right.
Right, but if you had stayed for the credits, you would have seen a 1.5-minute long otter sequence.
Oh no, I missed
you
that.
missed the otters.
I can't believe I missed that. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Well-
They're my favorite animal.
Well, we had shot a scene, we had captured a scene in the tank where Tuktire, the little girl, is in a near shore kind of surge, and the seaweed is, whatever it is, some macroalgae is really
Yeah.
surging back and forth. And she gets visited by these two otters that swim all around her, and she plays with them. And it was all shot in our wave tank because we were able to produce an underwater surge effect by by
fun.
driving the waves.
Yeah.
Right. And so I had captured the scene. We had originally kind of animated the otters. We actually used people with jetpacks on underwater jetpacks to fly around and do the hydrobatics of the otters. And for length of the film itself, I took them out. I took the scene out. And then when we were trying to construct an end montage for the Miley Cyrus song, we brought the otters back. So there's 1.5 minutes of the otters cavorting around with Tuk.
Well, now I have another excuse to go see the movie again, so that's good.
Oh, this was fun.
Man, I've got like 10 more burning questions, but I have to let you go. We'll have to do it again
All right,
sometime.
yeah, we'll do it.
Thank you so much.